Hi, I'm Pam Fox at pamfox.org, and it looks like we're live. Just double checking, yes, we're live. Today's video, I'm going to be talking about the connection between hiatal hernia and singing. This is actually something that gets brought up quite frequently among my viewers, among my customers. They tend to be more symptomatic while they're singing, like if they're a professional singer or if they're in the church choir, this kind of thing. And I have a great email that I got today or yesterday. I got it this morning from Bob. So I'm going to read the email and then I'm going to address this topic. The email says, "Hi Pam, for the past several months I've been able to keep my stomach down by doing the exercises in your program. Now that my stomach is down, I would like to rejoin the church choir. My doctor tells me to drink a lot of water before I go to rehearsal and before singing on Sunday morning. Do you think it's safe for me to rejoin the choir, or will the singing make the stomach move up and cause flare-up again of shortness of breath, acid reflux, and heartburn? Thanks. This program has been a lifesaver and I can avoid surgery and taking antacids. Bob." So, hi Fran. Glad you could join me. So I want to thank Bob. That was a really great update on how he's doing in reversing his hiatal hernia. And this is yet just another example of someone who is reversing their hiatal hernia, who was able to overcome symptoms. He's no longer taking antacids. So we're going to talk about this very specific topic of the connection between hiatal hernias and singing. So first of all, typically what happens for people who, let's say it's someone like Bob who's in the church choir, many people who sing have somewhere along the line been trained to stand up tall and to pull in their abs. And if you followed me for any length of time, you know that pulling in your abs can cause a hiatal hernia if you're doing it repetitively, long-term, over time, and it can certainly exacerbate a hiatal hernia. It's that sucking in your gut, it literally holds your stomach up it supports it up in that herniated position. And so let's say Bob would go to choir practice or go to sing in church on Sunday morning, and whether it's consciously or subconsciously or not, more than likely he was sucking in his gut in order to sing. And again, this is something that kind of gets taught along the way for many people who sing as part of that support for the diaphragm. And yes, sucking your gut does push your diaphragm up nice and high. But where and why somewhere along the line people thought this was a good idea for singing and supporting and strengthening the diaphragm, I'm really not sure, because the truth is that when we support our diaphragm by contracting our abdominal muscles, we're actually aiding that diaphragm's ability to contract instead of isolating the diaphragm and allowing it to do the work, the strengthening work on its own. Okay? So it's really important not to pull in and tighten the abs, but to really let those abs go and relax the abs when you're warming up for singing, while you're performing, if you're a singer. And it really can take time and practice to retrain yourself how to do this. And a lot of you out there already know this because you're trying to do it already. And so I've done a lot of videos on this idea of strengthening the diaphragm and isolating the diaphragm so that you're not supporting it with contracting the abs, but instead relaxing the abs. And so I'm just going to share a little bit with you today what I shared with Bob about that. So what I told Bob, well, number one, he says that his doctor suggested that he drink a lot of water before rehearsal and before singing on Sunday morning. So the reason sometimes doctors will tell you to do this is because if you drink some water on an empty stomach, then your stomach becomes kind of like a water balloon, and then that acts kind of like as a weight that will pull your stomach down and hang down. This works for some people. It doesn't work for some people. Some people find when they drink water on an empty stomach, people with a hiatal hernia, that it makes their symptoms worse. Keep in mind that when you do drink, let's say you drank a mason jar full of water and started your choir rehearsal, that water is not just going to sit in there like a water balloon throughout the entire rehearsal. It's going to begin to make its way throughout the digestive tract. The body's going to do what it does with the water. It's not just going to sit there for that full amount of time. But for many people, this does give a little bit of relief, as it does act as a balloon and kind of pull the stomach down and away from the diaphragm. However, in the case of singing, like I was just mentioning, so many people have been trained to contract and pull in their abs, suck in their gut while they're singing. And so once you do that, once you go back to that old habit, that contraction of those abs will push that stomach back up, whether it's full of water or not. I mean, if it's full of water and it's weighted down, it's going to be a little bit harder to push it up. But contracting your abs and sucking your gut puts a tremendous amount of pressure on the abdominal cavity. It increases the pressure in that cavity. Your stomach sits just below your hiatus, which is that little hole in your diaphragm. And so when that pressure goes up, it's going to seek escape through that hole, okay? And even if you've, and so another thing I told Bob, go ahead and rejoin the choir, you know, do it as a trial run, see how it goes. But make sure you continue to do the exercises. You want to keep your diaphragm healthy and strong. So this is something I mentioned in my hiatal hernia reversal maintenance course, my kind of part 2 course that I sell. If you do all the work, let's say you did a bunch of work to lose weight, you know, you exercise, you diet, let's say you spend a year really working hard, you reach your goal, and then you revert right back to doing what you were doing before. You're gonna lose all of those gains, right? And so the same thing is with you know, tightening up that little hiatus, that hole, by strengthening your diaphragm. If you go to all that work to move the stomach down, tighten the hiatus, and then you stop, there's going to be a likelihood, an even higher likelihood for someone who previously had a hiatal hernia, for that hole then to dilate once again, loosen up, the muscles weaken up, and then to have a reherniation occur. So ongoing maintenance is important. It's not hard. I'm here to tell you it's not hard. If you can get into the habit of doing, you know, 1, 2, 3, 5 minutes a day, it doesn't take much. I barely do. If I remember, I might do 1 to 2 minutes of my breathing exercise every day. And it's been enough for me to maintain my reversal. So I also am very aware all the time throughout the day, whether I'm driving in my car, or I'm sitting at my desk, or I'm washing dishes or cooking, or I'm at work, whatever I'm doing, working out, to relax my abs. So I'm always trying to be very aware to relax my abs so my stomach stays down and doesn't get pushed up. The other thing I wanted to mention about, you know, singers, singers are performers. Even if you're in the church choir, you're in front of an audience, right? And so it can be very natural, whether you have stage fright or not, even if you haven't had this kind of training to pull in your abs, it can be very natural for those muscles to tighten up, just as kind of a bit of a response to that stress that you may be encountering by being in front of an audience. Whether you have stage fright or not, our muscles contract with the smallest amount of stress. Someone might be crumpling their popcorn bag at the movie theater, you know, 3 rows back, and it's just mildly irritating. That could cause your abdominal muscles to contract. When you're there in the movie theater and the movie gets suspenseful, you know that saying, you know, you're sitting at the edge of your seat, that can cause your abs to contract. When your spouse gets angry at you and you start to get into a fight, that can cause your muscles to contract. When you're walking down the street and you forgot your coat and it's windy and cold outside, that can cause your muscles to contract. When you're laughing, when you're, you know, things like laughing and coughing and sneezing, all of those things can cause your muscles to contract. So any little bit of stress, different postures, there's a lot of different things that can cause your muscles to contract. And when that happens, the pressure goes up in the abdominal cavity. And again, that stomach is going to want to seek out that escape through the hiatus. So I told Bob, you know, surely I think it's a great idea for him to rejoin the choir. I believe it's been a while since I've worked with him, but if I recall correctly, Bob, you took some time off to really make reversing your hiatal hernia a priority, and now you're wanting to get back into the choir. I think that's great, and I really think that you should do that. Just remember to keep doing the exercises. Do a little bit of a warm-up, you know, right when you get to choir practice and right before church. I know that you're doing the maintenance program. Those exercises in the maintenance program are great. You could take literally 3 minutes before your choir practice and do those diaphragm exercises that really push the stomach down and warm up your diaphragm. That would be great. Relax your abs while you're singing. So when you start to notice that your abs are pulling in, just let that go. You can do some of the, you know, just the gentle abdominal massages to help those abdominal muscles relax if you feel like you're having a really hard time letting that tension go in the abs. You could try the water. That's going to be kind of a trial and error thing for you. Like I was saying before, for some people, creating that weight really makes a difference. For others, not so much. So that's going to be something you'll need to experiment with. And then posture. Just remember your posture. So obviously, the taller you are, the higher your diaphragm is, which means it's going to move your diaphragm up and away from your stomach. And then, you know, always just relaxing those abs so the stomach can move down and away from the diaphragm. And then creating a little bit of an arch in the back lifts that diaphragm just up a little bit higher. So if you are at choir practice and you notice maybe you do start to have some indigestion, you're like, oh no, I'm having some indigestion, I must have pushed my stomach back up. That doesn't necessarily mean you re-herniated. So, and that's the thing, we really need to clarify and distinguish between what I call a pre-hiatal hernia and an actual hiatal hernia. And so for several people, they reverse their hiatal hernia. They know they've been able to get the stomach down. They get relief from their symptoms, and then periodically the symptoms come back. So when your stomach is pressing against your diaphragm and not necessarily through, you can have some of the same symptoms like belching and indigestion and reflux. I really don't have the appropriate prop to show you, so just try to imagine when your stomach is pressing up against your diaphragm, where your esophagus and your stomach meets. Remember, you have that little valve, and that little valve is a one-way valve that opens when the food goes in, and then it clamps down tight to not allow anything to come back up. When that valve gets irritated or it gets pressure put on it, and if that stomach is getting crammed against the diaphragm, even if it's not going through, there can be pressure on that valve, right? And so it's gonna have a difficult time clamping down. It's gonna have a difficult time performing its function of clamping down tight if it's got any type of pressure on it. If your stomach is kind of pushing up into the valve, you know what I mean? Like, your esophagus isn't going to go anywhere as your stomach pushes up. It's going to stay right where it's at. And the stomach is going to kind of push into itself, into the esophagus where that valve is. And so if that happens, then it's going to have a difficult time clamping down tight as well. And so you may experience some reflux, or you may not experience reflux. You may just have a little bit of mild nausea and indigestion because there's some irritation, because it's pressing on that valve just a tiny little bit, maybe just a tiny little bit. So just keep those things in mind. But I think that's great, Bob, that you're going back to the choir. Excuse me, please keep me informed. Let me know how it goes. I would love to hear back from you, and I hope that it all just goes perfect. But those are some little tips that you can kind of keep in mind, and you can always excuse yourself for 5 or 10 minutes if you need to. Go to a private area, lay down flat on the floor, and really just, you know, lengthen your body, stretch your body out to move that diaphragm away from the stomach. Do some of the exercises to help those abdominal muscles relax so that stomach can move down. Because if you start to be symptomatic, again, it's not necessarily that you re-herniated, but that your stomach is pushing against your diaphragm and just irritating that valve a little bit. So good luck to you, Bob, and keep me informed, and thanks for the email. All right, everyone else, thank you so much for watching. This was a short video, and I hope you have a lovely day.